Awesome. So hi everyone, we are joined today with Jacquie, and we're going to talk about Jacquie's journey and how it intersected, how our paths met along the way. So thank you for doing this, Jacquie. And do you want to tell the people of what you were diagnosed with? And also kind of like the really cool story of, you know, because you were humming and hawing whether to do this, because you're kind of putting yourself out there,
yeah,
which you kind of never signed up for. You have a job. I mean, I have a job. But the really nice message that you received when you kind of asked the universe, should I do this?
mm-hmm.
And what that was. So
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Yeah, so I was diagnosed in September of 2020 with large diffuse B-cell lymphoma. So a big mass in my chest, aggressive form of lymphoma, and thankfully I am in remission now. But, you know, along the way, you know, Patty and I met. And yeah, as Patty mentioned, I was, you know, I had seen Vanessa's, you know, talk that she did with you, and I was like, I should probably share, but I have never been a social media person to begin with. I post very little. I don't even like responding on group chats, honestly. So
yeah, so this is a really big deal for you.
Yeah.
You know, and I think people should, we want to appreciate that and honor that this is not, you know, you haven't come to this decision willy-nilly.
Yeah.
To
Yeah.
share your story.
So,
it's not
while I was going through my chemo treatments, I decided to start posting little, just, you know, minute, 2-minute workout videos on this Facebook group, which was only other people that had my exact same diagnosis. Because
and this was in September you started doing this, or was this in the summer?
In like, actually probably I posted in my first one probably midway through treatment, so like October, November. So started posting on the site while I was going through my chemo treatments. You know,
and you were the fittest that you had ever been in your life, and you were already eating clean.
Yeah, that's right.
So
yeah.
I think we want to preface with that, because this was not something that you felt kind of blindsided, because you were really, you know, in tip-top shape. So even you knowing that cough in February, let's go back to 2020 February, you had this cough, this irritation, and then you kind of were like, oh my God, what is this? And then shutdown happened.
Yeah.
And then to try and get into a doctor's was
with a dry cough.
With a dry cough.
And a low-grade fever, impossible. So,
but you kind of knew that there was something off.
Yeah, I kind of knew there was something off, and you know, it had gone on for a couple of months. I went to a functional medicine doc, and they're like, leaky gut, and I'm like, okay, maybe. But then, I'm like, I eat super clean. I take all the supplements they wanted me to take. I work out every day. She was actually shocked, because she said, the way your blood work's showing up, I'm surprised you have so much muscle mass, because like your body's like spewing out protein. And so I said, you know what, it's got to be something else. And I was at a loss for getting like medical help with it. So I started down the path of saying, okay, there's got to be like something emotional to this. Like maybe I'm depressed because we've been on lockdown for months, you know? So I just started kind of going through
and
that.
You already knew, didn't you? Because you already knew, or you had heard, or maybe you'd read already, that your emotions went into your physical.
Yeah, absolutely. I had done, you know, for a couple of years, you know, I learned about tapping, you know, I had done, you know, some tapping, you know, with another person who was trained in it. And then, you know, when this first started, I was like, okay, let me see what it is. And I went to my like default, like YouTube video, like tapping for depression. And I tapped and, you know, released some emotions. It definitely like struck a chord.
Yeah.
But I'm like, okay, that's not it. Like, it's still got to be something else. You know, we all have things that happen in life, right? And emotional stuff. And
it was, you know, I think there's a doorway to go into tapping, to anything.
Yeah.
But we also have to identify when we're doing surface things.
Yeah, exactly. It was the
And
surface.
skimming the surface. And there's a reason for skimming the surface, to be like, oh, well, something's resonating here.
Mm-hmm.
But I can't really go deeper because there's stuff that my subconscious isn't wanting me to do alone.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And I knew that. Yeah. I'm like, okay, I know I've done the surface. So I knew I needed somebody to go there with, right? Because I didn't even know what it was, you know? And so I started reaching out, you know, I'd reach out to 2 different folks because I'm like, okay, I've heard about Reiki, and the connections didn't happen for different reasons. And then I was talking to my good friend about, you know, I had my diagnosis now at this point, and I was talking.
What date is this? Because what
Yeah.
date is this? Is this
So now
like
this
August?
is September. Yeah, early September, September 4th. I got my diagnosis.
And when had you watched Heal originally?
Originally, I had watched it probably about a year and a half ago.
But you had fallen asleep before
but I fell asleep.
my part came on.
Yeah, I fell asleep and I woke up. Yeah.
Shut down.
Shut down. And I woke up actually at your part. And I was awake for 10 to 20 seconds. So I had no idea what had happened. And I just started like bawling. And then I fell right back to sleep. So, and
now,
then fast forward a year and a half.
It's important to say here that is a common flag to, oh no. Oh, no, 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 no,
Yeah.
no. No, I don't want to see that.
Yeah. Like,
I'm not ready for that. Abort.
Right.
I get that when people read when they read the books, the Positive Joy books.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh yeah, I fell asleep after I read that paragraph.
Yeah. That definitely happens.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so, so then fast forward a year and a half, I'm talking to my good friend about my diagnosis, and she says, well, have you seen Heal? And she said her daughter is working with Patty Penn, and I didn't know the name. And she's like, she's from the Heal documentary. And I said, okay.
And she's in a different state, right?
She's in a different state.
She's way in the Midwest.
Yeah, that's right. And so I said, okay. And she said, I'll have her reach out to you. And so, because that's how my friend is, she's very like take charge, and she's going to get everything sorted away. She's going to take care of me. And then she comes back and says, nope, you have to reach out to her yourself. She doesn't take referrals.
And I'll tell you why I don't take referrals, because the person has to be ready.
Mm-hmm.
And just because a family member or a friend wants to jostle you in, if you're not ready, you're just going to shut down.
Yeah.
Or it might be too much for your system,
mm-hmm.
the work that I'm going to do. And that might be a year down the line, 6 months down the line.
Yeah.
So it can actually be more harmful.
Right. If you're not really ready.
Everybody needs to be on the same frequency.
Yeah. 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 And so, again, and to that point, she sent me the info to contact you, and I didn't. A couple weeks went by. And I'm like, you know what, I need to put that on. So I put it on, and I was multitasking, doing some work, and I look up and it's your part again. And I said, oh, that's the woman. And so I had missed the intro, and I Google Heal Cast, and I said, oh, that's Patty Penn. And I said, I must need to reach out to her, because you were the one I remember from watching it, and the name came up. So I emailed right then and there. It was late at night, 10, 11 o'clock at night. And then, I think I got a response, the next day, and asking for some information, right? And so, when you initially reached out and had this list of questions, and I said, okay, I can answer these questions. And I wrote back, and then, a couple hours later, I get this list of responses, and I just started reading the questions, and I just started crying, based on your questions. And I was like, oh shoot. I'm like, yes, and I just knew, I'm like, yeah, I didn't say much, but you knew, we're going to get there.
Read what your answers are. I read what you're not telling me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I was like, how did you know to ask me that?
And it's, it can be quite shocking.
Yeah.
Sometimes to people.
Yeah.
You know, but you know, time is not to be wasted
Right.
when you have a diagnosis
Mm-hmm.
with questions that are saccharine.
Yeah. Yeah. It wasn't. Yeah.
And you were saying things but saying nothing.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and also you were saying, oh, these things, this thing happened as if it was no big deal.
Yeah.
But it was traumatic.
Right. Yeah. And that's what I remember too from some of the things back and forth. You'd ask me a question and I would just very nonchalantly like write back. And then you'd be like, well, you know, that's not like normal, or, you know, that wasn't like what was supposed to happen. I'm like, oh, like, duh. But like, it had never occurred to me like that before. And it's like, oh,
but
yeah.
I actually think that's a coping mechanism for trauma response.
Right.
I think we look at things in a way that we are able to handle. And, but it still sits there in the system.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then sometimes traumas are packed on top of one another because they go unresolved.
Right.
For you to start going back and looking at them. And what we start to do is we start to unpack it.
Yeah.
And even in the unpacking, you know, I say to people, you know, this may take 2 months. It may take 3 months. It may take 6 months for you to answer those questions. But it will be at your pace, not mine.
Right. Yeah. And I know. And I think we went back and forth over a couple of weeks. And I think that was when I had started chemo at that point. And so just for everyone, so I started chemo early October through the end of January. So I did inpatient chemo. So it was 6 days at a time in the hospital, connected to chemo 24/7. And I did that like every 3 weeks over those couple of months. So yeah, we started the conversations, and I think we did our first session together like after my first chemo round of chemo.
Yes. Yeah, you were at home, you just finished. And I think that is something to point out, that really for someone going through the chemo and doing this emotional excavation, it's not really the norm.
Yeah.
Usually people will wait till they get through the physical chemotherapy to then emotionally excavate. And you decided to do that when you were knee deep in it.
Yeah.
Well, you were kind of like wading welly deep in it.
Yeah.
And you were pulling, you know,
let's just do it.
Bar and flushing things out and doing what we do. And getting back to the tapping that you had been doing, you know, before, when you started doing this tapping, which I call dynamic tapping, which is very stream of consciousness, it was so kind of, I mean, there's nowhere to hide with it, to be honest with you.
Right. Yeah.
Like, there's nowhere to kind of seek refuge. It's, you have to kind of go into it with like, okay, it's going to come up, whatever that thing is, but you also know that I'm not going to drop the ball. Right.
Yeah. It was like, you know, as we had talked about, you know, some things that I've never shared or said out loud. And it was like, okay, they're really big, like difficult things, but then we tapped through it and then it was like gone, you know, and it was like,
and
I don't
think
have
that's
to like
the thing,
carry
right?
that now.
I think you're right. When you said to me at that one point, oh my God, I've never said this out loud. Yeah. I was like, we should throw a party right now.
Right.
Oh, hallelujah. Right? Yeah. We should, like, you know, you're admitting it. You're admitting this thing that you've never said out loud. You thought it. Yeah. But thinking it and saying it out loud are two different things. And when you said it, you could really feel it. Yeah. And that's when we go in and we tap on it, when we are in the dynamicness of it, just in the being. Yeah. There's nowhere to put it back down again.
Right. Yeah.
But the great thing is we've got a tool to neutralize it.
To neutralize it. Yeah. And I think that's the thing. It's like, yeah, there's the stuff, but it's like, yeah, you have to work through it. But then that part isn't the hard part. It was the harder part was like, yeah, thinking about all of it. And then it's like, I can't even describe how it is. It was just like, but I had known like I need to lift this stuff, right? Because I need everything focused on like healing, right? Like I don't need this noise happening in my, body and my mind anywhere. Like we just need everything focused on getting through the physical.
And when
healing.
you're in the hospital having chemotherapy and sitting with yourself, there's no distractions.
Yeah.
There's no, oh, I'm going to go to a spin class, or I'm going to go and get a juice, or go to the movies, or, decide to ignore it once again.
Right. That's right.
It's front and center.
Yeah.
But you doing it at that time, and I had also suggested, I think it was around the holidays, that I said you needed to do your level 1, your Reiki 1.
Mm-hmm.
Like you couldn't have your friends sending you Reiki here and there.
Yeah.
You needed to be like, you're on antibiotics 3 times a day. You're on your like energy medicine 3 times a day, completely working on your connection to yourself, because there was definitely a disconnect between you being your true self, your really authentic self.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I think that was, we talk about like the synchronicities and how we came to work together. But when I was going through chemo, so it was, like I said, 5-6 days in the hospital. And the 4th day was always like the hardest day for me. It was like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, fine. And then Thursday, I would just start to get negative and feeling down. And so I said to myself going in, it was a Monday morning, and I was saying to myself, how am I going to get through this whole week without ever like having that dip and like feeling down? And then out of the blue, Patty sends me a message and says, hey, I think you should do Radical Miracles on Wednesday night. And I said, okay, fine. I'm not doing anything else, right? I don't know what this is, but
you aren't doing anything else but having like your last night of the week in your chemo.
Yeah. So we did, and we had the first Radical Miracles that Wednesday night, and I did it from my hospital room, and the nurses and doctors and everyone was great, because I said, block the door, don't come in and take my vitals, and they're like, hey, whatever you need to do, like totally supportive, like this is awesome.
Yeah, they were amazing, and we want to shout that out, because when people are doing this work in conjunction with their chemotherapy, that support is really amazing.
Yeah, it was awesome. And
I think we think that they won't get it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you don't know that I've attuned doctors and nurses to this as well.
Yeah. And I had nurses share that they had, learned Reiki years ago, and even
they know that their emotional, the emotional imbalances, the diseases, that they've watched it for decades, so they don't really have any judgments of it as much as people think that they do. Yeah.
That's it. Yeah. And then Thursday, late in the day, Thursday, my oncologist came in, and he's like, doing the regular updates, and he's like, this is like the best I've seen you this whole time. And I said, well, yeah, I'm doing Radical Miracles. And he's like, that's great. Keep doing it, So it did. It made like my Thursday, Friday that week. It was like, I never had that. And it was also that realization, which we talk about a lot in Radical Miracles, it wasn't a coincidence. I had asked, what am I going to do to get through this without being down? You didn't reach out by coincidence, and it was the thing that I needed to help me get through it, and it happened. So,
and then I think we also split the Reiki class.
We did.
One of my students was doing it, and you did a half day.
Yep.
So you got attuned, and you were able to do, the positions on yourself to tune in and, really kind of pause.
Yeah.
And enjoy having the ability to channel that energy to yourself.
Yeah.
right?
That's right.
So that's what I wanted you to have. We didn't do a full day. You did it in half days. And then I think it was maybe 2 months later, you did the second half of the class.
Yeah, it was.
So we
And
took
that,
it at your pace.
right, at my pace, right? And it was, yeah, just what I needed. And, you know, I was able to do that. And yeah, to that point, I mean, it was like amazing. And I think, you know, I definitely know that's part of the reason I got through this so easily, because it was a really intense regimen. It was super aggressive. And, you know, even my doctor now is like, you're doing way better than most people at this point. Yeah, I mean, sure, there was points that I didn't feel awesome, but I think it was because I had so many people sending me, you know, Reiki, and then I was able to do it with myself, and I had dealt with this emotional stuff, and it was,
and you know, it's important to point out, you know, you would never have been able to, I don't think, of got to the depths of the core issues that you were dealing with by just doing a few videos that you were watching, because there is a part of yourself and your subconscious that is protecting you from going there alone. And being able to handle that. And I think choosing those people that are able to meet you in that place, because not every person can meet you in that place.
Right. And, you know, and having that, like, knowing as well that, like, for me, you know, for us, it was, you know, that I could do this with you, right? And that, you know, I felt comfortable saying things. And I know there was that other, you know, day, probably, you know, 4 or 5 rounds in, when I was just really having a hard time, and you randomly again just FaceTimed me out of the blue, and I was like, oh, and I'm like crying, and I was just dealing with something somewhat trivial, but that was a big deal to me in that moment. And again, something I wasn't talking to anyone about, and you're like, what is it? And, you know, I told you, and you're like, you know, let's tap on it. And I was like, oh, you know, like, but, you know, we just take these things and we make them like so big. And, you know, when I need
we
again
make them so big because we don't have tools.
Right.
You know, it's not that we make them big, they are big. And sometimes even spiritual practices can be coping mechanisms, can be avoidance. You know, and we get little depletions of it. But sometimes I believe that it never truly goes away because it wants you to face something. It wants you to learn something about why it's not going away without the acknowledgement of it. So I do believe there are things that you can meditate and it will dissipate things, and you can have your yoga practice and you'll dissipate things, but there are certain things that will wait. And because it has to be acknowledged, the pain, the trauma has to be acknowledged for you to realize something about yourself, and to feel that how much you had disconnected from yourself, and come back home. And if that just disappears, you've missed that opportunity. So you have to weigh everything up of like, oh, why is this not shifting? There must be something else that is a little bit deeper that I need to excavate.
And I think it was also about, you know, for me, just like, knowing that. And I think, you know, what I've like learned, or how I've changed like through this too, was getting, you know, more aware of that knowing, like we do know, right? And so being aware of when you're ignoring things, and, you know, I could always tell, like when, you know, I would join one of the, you know, Reiki circles or Radical Miracles, like when you're in that space, like everything is really, you start noticing all the miracles, you start, you know, hearing, you know, what you're supposed to be hearing because you're connected to it. And then, but it's really easy to distract ourselves.
The state of consciousness that you are in and operating from a field
Yeah.
with everyone else.
Yeah.
So it's hard for you to disconnect or go offline because you have things to do and stay in the field together, or the rest of the group's gonna know,
Yeah.
you know,
Right.
you're a weak link.
Yeah.
And also admitting that you're like dropped the ball this week, and then everybody's like, okay, how did you drop the ball?
Yeah.
You know, because I was about to drop the ball, but you dropped the ball, you got the hot potato, you know. Yeah. And it's like everybody kind of knows in this community of the borrowing effects that we all have the same stuff, but just in different kind of points of view of it. And if one person can admit it, then yours might be 90%, but theirs might be 5% or 10%, but it's still blocking them, but they can't see it.
Right.
So there's a real kind of working together in symbiosis. And actually, some people, when they've done workshops, they're like, oh my God, I cannot believe the things that come out of your people's mouths. The things that they admit to. The things that they say, because they are so unfiltered, because they know this moment is an opportunity, not for me to hide it because I'm frightened what everybody's going to judge me like in the group, that everybody's actually going to applaud you.
Yeah.
And it's an opportunity to collapse it, not just for yourself, but for everybody else who has it by degree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. So it's, you know, I think even you made the radical miracles, you know, because I think sometimes people do, oh, let's do the radical miracles willy-nilly.
Yeah.
And they come in, and then someone's sitting in a hospital room having chemotherapy doing radical miracles. It kind of gives it a little bit more depth.
Right.
And everybody it shocked quite a few people, you know, and it made their experience deeper, richer, and much more present, much more there with every moment of that 4-week course, you know. So I thank you for doing that, because let me tell you, I don't know a lot of people that can do the amount of work that you did while you're going through chemo. Most people wait till afterwards.
Yeah.
And I think you've had that experience as well, because we were doing circles and stuff, and you were telling people, oh, this is for people that are going through cancer. And they were like, no. Yeah. I'm not ready.
Right.
And you have to respect where people are at.
That's right. Yeah.
And I think that's something that, you know, real healers are really very aware of, that tuning of when people are ready.
Yeah.
And when people are ready to let it go, and when people are circling, right? They're circling, dancing around. Yeah. You know, dancing around the issues, dancing around the work.
The work, yeah.
And I'm aware of it. I mean, I have people that, you know, look at the website for 3 years.
Yeah.
Before they reach out.
Right.
And then that means something comes in their life that they need to reach out. But
Yeah.
you think to yourself, what came first, the chicken or the egg, right?
Right.
Was it having to kind of go up in frequency for you to reach out, which you could have done 3 years ago? So it's kind of that everything happens at that right time.
Yeah. That's right.
It's like, but how can we make things easier for ourselves?
Right. Exactly.
How can we, and not easier, but with ease, with flow.
Yeah.
You know, of knowing what it is that I need to do when I need to do it. And I think that's what people sometimes, they think, again, it's the thinker, they overthink struggling with that.
Yeah.
And it's not really a struggle.
Right. Yeah, it's just, yeah, it's like, I think that it comes back to, you know, being tuned in to like, know, right? To be listening to what you're trying to tell yourself. what you're
Yes.
sensing, and, then taking that action. Because, I at least I feel like grateful that I'm aware enough when I'm doing it. I still might ignore it for a minute, but then I'm like, no, your patterns.
Why do you think people, from your point of view and what you see and what you have seen, why do you believe that people do it?
I think
Or why
because,
do you do it? Why
yeah,
did you do it?
yeah. I mean, I think it goes back to, that like subconscious, like almost like there's a like something that's trying to protect you, and sometimes it's working when it doesn't need to, so and I think when we tap, we do that, right? Like, even though this might be happening, it's okay, like I can handle this, like. And so there is that default, like when something's hard, it's like, I don't want to go there, and so you have to be like, but I can, like
Yeah.
it's going to be better if I go there. But it's acknowledge, and for me, it's like acknowledging that. And I just think until you have done that, or like know it, it's hard to do.
And then you have the flip side.
Mm-hmm.
You have people that now, when they do it, and they start to enjoy the excavation and finding things
Mm-hmm.
to shift and change,
Yeah.
that they're like, well, why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's kind of like it tips,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
And
For
you
sure.
start to enjoy the opportunity to see what it is that you need to shift without getting the life lesson.
Exactly. Yeah, for sure.
You're really tuned into the subtle energy, and that's why I love the Reiki, because the Reiki, you can't, like, I cannot separate the spiritual conscious energy
Mm-hmm.
of Reiki from the tapping.
Yeah.
Because that energy allows us to know.
Yeah.
And it allows us to tune in.
Yeah.
And be unafraid to the force.
Right. Yeah. And I think that was one of the big things that I learned too, because it was when we were going to do the True to You Cancer Circle, and there was nobody there, right? And you said, well, what do you want to tap on? And I was like, well, I don't know. I mean, I feel great. Everything's going good. And it was like, you don't just tap a problem, right? Like, you tap to like bring everything else in. I was like, oh. And so it was just that shift, right? To say like, yeah, I hadn't had that mindset about it, right? This was just to like fix a problem, as opposed to just bringing in, more and more.
Yeah, like for instance, if people aren't aware, because I work with a lot of creatives here
Mm-hmm.
in Los Angeles, we're working on any resistances or any blockages to actually receiving or allowing more of the good stuff, because we're not hardwired to enjoy really life.
Yeah.
So when we're like, oh, this is enough, it's too much, right? So when we start to kind of get rid of those barriers, we can kind of handle more.
Right. And that's really exciting.
Yeah, that was really exciting.
Yeah.
But yes, thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah.
Does anybody have any questions for me or for Jacquie? If not, we'll sign off.
Yeah, well, thank you, Patty. I mean, thank you for everything through this. I know, because I am doing great. Like, I'm doing amazing. Like, I know that not everybody has the same experience that I've had, but I do think a lot of it has to do.
I think that's why you wanted to share it.
Yeah, absolutely. It is, because it's like.
And I don't think we even told what the lady had said
to
you at the beginning. Let's finish with her message. So you were really unsure about doing this, and you asked the universe, I don't know whether I should share my story. Yeah. And then, bing, you got a message from a woman who was also going through cancer. And do you want to read the message that she sent you?
Yeah, so I had posted a little short workout video on this Facebook group for people with my specific treatment. And like I said, I'm not comfortable doing this. And it was not a pretty video, but I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to put it out there. Actually, I had like my chemo bald head, a bloody nose dripped down on my shirt. It wasn't good, but I'm like, I'm putting it out there anyways. And this woman had you know, sent me a message back and she said, hey, she finished chemo at the same time I did. And she said, I just have to, you know, tell you that that first video you posted, you know, your first workout in chemo, she's like, it really inspired me. She's like, I just wasn't feeling it, but I saw it. And I, you know, she's like, I took my bald head out to the garage and I started lifting because she said, I knew that if you could do it, I could at least try. And then she said, she said, and like you, she's like, the first time I went for a run after getting my scan showing I was in remission, she's like, I was running and just like crying tears of joy as I ran. And like seeing you say that, you know, I knew this was like a good thing. And it, you know, it was like, yeah, it was just amazing. And I'm like, okay, yes, I knew somebody, you know, that's all I wanted to see was like somebody like living and feeling good. And hey, it affected this one person and she got up and started moving her body, which we know is so important. And,
Yeah.
you know, that made me say, yep, okay, we got to do this.
Yeah. So thank you so much for sharing, you know, because as you said, you know, it's these are intimate stories, and they're not just you're not doing it for just kind of the sake of doing it. You're doing it, and it's a big deal for you.
Yeah.
So I think it was really great that you see someone's just sent a message right now. You're incredible, and you've inspired me to today. So that's what we want. We just want people to know that there's a way in, there's a way through, and you know, even in your dark days, just you know, look for the light, ask for what it is that you need to make your life better today, right? Yeah. What is it that I need to do? What is it I need to see? Yeah. What is it I need to hear today that's going to shift my energy?
Yeah.
Right? That's going to lift my frequency. And thank you everybody for tuning in. It was amazing. We could feel all your great energy, and thank you. Yeah. I'll post this in the next few days.
Okay. All right. Thanks so much.
Take care.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.